What's up, everybody? Nicole and I are back. We're shooting another episode of Shooting the Shift. And today we're going to focus on what is the shift? What is the shift into higher consciousness? What does it mean to expand your awareness? And what are we actually going to be talking about throughout the course of the next few episodes? So we both have different experiences with shifting, and it's a process. And so we wanted to kind of like touch on a couple things. What do certain people experience when it comes to awakening to higher levels of awareness? What are some of the challenges that, the not so glamorous aspects of shifting into higher consciousness? It's quite a journey, and it's not always rainbows and butterflies. So we figured maybe we'd even talk about the darker sides of shifting.
Yeah. There are very dark sides of shifting. Especially when you're just starting to get into that, having a consciousness, having a self-awareness. It starts off in these very dark places. And, when you hear people talk about the dark night of the soul, those are those deep shamanic places that we go to that we don't know if we're going to come out. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes when you're in it, it's so heavy and so dark and so lonely and painful that you're not sure if you can reach out to anyone. So you sit there alone and analyzing and ruminating.
I think too, like that's when a lot of people, when people are in that dark night, they're in the midst of that catalyst for awakening, you experience this existential suffering where you really feel alone and you feel isolated and you feel separate. And so I think that's almost sometimes what is the awakening to this higher perspective of, is there more than me? To me, that is like a pivotal point in that shift in consciousness, is accepting that there is a state of being or a state of awareness that is more expanded than our limited perception of self. And so much of that deep suffering that people experience as within the human experience is that feeling, the illusion of separation. So do you think that that's like a pivotal aspect to the shift, is awakening to something that's greater than self?
I think that's a part of it. And then actually realizing who is yourself is a huge part of it. Because when you realize who you truly are, there is a connection to everything else, an awakening to something outside of yourself that is also within the self. So you get into that whole quantum aspect.
It's like a larger connectivity. So it's like funny, it's like that expansion of like we experience ourselves as limited and separate and isolated, and the shift in consciousness is more, it's like a recognition of more of who I am. So much of our suffering comes from that belief that I am a limited being. And then as we start to expand ourselves into these higher realms of consciousness, we enter into like another playing field. It's like another dimension of experiencing ourselves as human, but also as infinite beings of creative potential. But just like, with all new birth comes a little bit of pain, a little bit of expansion, a little bit of growth. And so before we started filming, Nicole and I were talking about sometimes like the resistance that we feel when we're being invited into the growth process. Like, people who identify as spiritual or expanded in their awareness, or God forbid, people use the word woke. It's almost like glamorized. Like it's like this beautiful process, and it's not always so glamorous, right?
Right, especially in the beginning stages. So we talked a little bit earlier about how there are these different stages. And, when you're first starting off, you're feeling, and it's very murky and dark and dank, really. It's not a fun place. It feels like quicksand. But when you overcome your obstacles and adversities and you actually see them for what they are, lessons and opportunities. That's one thing that when I work with my clients, there's this question that I ask about, because this is what I asked myself, was every time I went through something, what is the lesson and what is the opportunity that it presents? Because when you can answer both of those questions, you're in a completely different space. And it forces you to dig deep.
You're no longer the victim to your life circumstance. You're now interactive. So I can't
Yes.
remember where I heard it, but there was this, it said like there's 3 ways to perceive life, as though life is happening to you and like you're a victim to it, or life is happening for you, which is that opportunity aspect, or life is happening through you. And I think that's like that, those peak experiences of shifting is when you realize, oh my God, I am connected to everything and everything is connected to me. And this higher awareness of self can actually be born into the world through me, through this creative vessel, if I can first go through those other stages of, oh my God, those moments when life is happening to me and I'm a victim and I'm resisting it. And in that resistance, I create my own suffering. So we talked about that too. Is the shift full of suffering, or is it full of bliss, or is it like a mashup of everything in between?
Perspective. It's all about what your perception is, your perspective on everything that's happening around you, and the level of your awareness. Because I feel like remembering back into those times when it was just hard and not as aware as I am now, right? The first pieces when I can think back to a time when it was really dark. I was super depressed. I fantasized all day long about how I could leave this world. And that is not a fun place to be, right?
Yeah.
And yet, what held me there were my young kids. I had 3 little boys. And every day, I'd think, well, I could, just drive off of that or drive into that or whatever. But these kids need me. And okay, so I'd hang on just a little longer. Just a little longer. Something just kept saying, just a little. That's when I had my near-death experience.
I was just gonna say, what was the awakening moment? So it was the near-death experience that woke you up.
Yeah, there was these levels, right? Because when I was a kid, I was stifled with it. My intuition was, not a good thing to have because it wasn't godly, is how it was perceived. And so that awoken that intuition at a much greater scale.
The near-death experience?
The near-death experience. Everything was blown wide open. And it was so surreal when it happened. Like time literally slowed down and my mind was going super fast. I can still remember everything. Every little detail. And, when things just go, and then there's silence. Like when there's absolutely clear silence, no sound. And it's a freaky thing.
And isn't there so much information available to us in that place where there is no mind? It's just, there's information that we can tap into when the mind is actually.
It was like super presence.
Exactly. When there's no time. That's another beautiful concept about our suffering too. So much of our suffering ties back into our perception of time. And so when you reach those states of timelessness or eternity and you realize I'm one with this eternity, life takes on, like that can also be a catalyst for the shift. So a near-death experience or a sudden loss or trauma or something disrupts our perception of time. Someone gets a diagnosis and all of a sudden their perception of time here changes. These are all symptoms of awakening in a sense, because it dismantles our human concept of, or not human, our egoic concept of who and what we are as limited beings. So having that near-death experience, you think expanded your self-awareness, or?
So many things happened in such a short period of time. I actually saw the person too quickly. There's so many details, but I won't go into all of them. But there was a car on the other side of the road. It was rush hour on the Mass Pike. And everything just slowed down. And it felt like it took my head and looked over. And across the Jersey barrier, I could see this woman, her car was hit. She was just kind of swaying from the impact. And I saw all the details about her. And then I was like, okay, how did that happen? So time slowed down, yet my mind was racing, thinking, how did that happen? Where's the person that hit her? And then I look up, and this guy in his car is about to land in my lap. His face was all contorted, screaming. And I'm looking at him going, oh my God. And then I immediately saw he's going to land right here, like where my steering wheel was. And his car was going to crush my car. Roof was going to come down. It was going to snap my neck, and then I'd be dead. And I saw all of that unfold, and I screamed. I screamed, and I ducked down as far as I could, like this, in my car, because I didn't want the roof to crush my head. That's when I saw all of my family members come up before me, and then I said goodbye to each single person, and then I was like, okay, I'm ready. And then everything went black. And when everything went black, I felt like when you pull back a pinball in the machine and then you let that spring rip and that pinball just goes. That was me. All of a sudden, I just felt like I was going through this space. And then when I came to, it was like, I don't want to do this too loud for the microphone, but I came to and I was like, like super loud and gasping for breath. And I came through like, oh my God, I almost just died. Oh my God, I should have been dead. And then I was like looking around, and rush hour, no cars on the highway. Not in front of me, not behind me, not on the other side. And then I see this one lone car coming on the other side. I'm like, oh my God, am I dead? And at that point, I called my mom. It was like just instinctual. I called my mom up, and when she answered, she was frantic. She's like, oh my God, Nikki, are you okay? I was just praying for you. I usually pray for you in the morning, but something told me that I needed to pray for you right now. Blah, 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 blah. And she's going on. And I'm like, Mom, can you shut up for 1 minute? I'm like, she's like, are you okay? And I said, am I dead? And she's like, oh, you're not dead. And she's like, it's going on and on. And I said, I don't know. I think I might be dead. And it was just like this really confused moment of, what is real? What is real? And then I realized, okay, well, I'm still alive. I went home and I just grabbed my kids and was like, and I just embraced life at that point. Everything shifted.
Ooh,
it was immediate. It was intense. And things just kept happening. And then it got to a point where I was questioning, who am I right now? Am I still me at this point?
Do you think you're a walk-in?
That was a huge part of it. Yeah.
For those who aren't aware, it's another thing we can talk about: starseeds, walk-ins, wanderers, all of those fun things. But a walk-in is essentially a kind of a pivotal moment in a person's life where they will say either another being walks into their life experience, walks into their body and now takes on a new perspective of consciousness, maybe a higher
higher aspect of yourself.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's another way I've heard it, is you kind of download more of your higher self
Yes.
potential into your life. And I think we both kind of identify with that a little bit, but that's really crazy.
And it was really intense with all of the things that unfolded and just presented itself with the
Immediately
whole
after.
walk-in. I did have a whole experience with, I was on a retreat. So just everything exploded. I was having major visions, way more intense than I ever had visions before, because I have very prophetic dreams and visions and all these different things. And when one thing after another is happening to you, and it just feels like I don't even have time to process this stuff. I ended up at a retreat for Drunvalo Melchizedek Merkaba meditation.
I never knew that about you.
Yeah, well, the Merkaba kept coming up in my life even before that. It kept coming up in different ways. And I actually had printed the meditation off at one point, and then it just sat in a drawer until this happened. And then I ended up at this retreat, and the woman that was teaching the retreat, she said, well, I don't know why, but this video jumped into my bag, so I figured I'd take it if you guys want to watch it. So we were all like, yeah, let's watch it. And it was Drunvalo talking about his nephew having a walk-in experience. And this was right at a time where I was so confused about what was happening with me, and I felt like a completely different person. And, what does that mean? And am I nuts? And when he told this story, I was like, oh. And I think I held my breath for like minutes, because I was like in my head going, okay, what is it? What does that mean? What does it mean? And that's exactly what happened to me. And so it took me a little bit. I kind of went alone, because it was heavy processing, because it was like, okay, who am I then? And when you are not sure, because you have been in this thick of it.
The human suffering part of it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's that expanded state, and you start asking that question.
Yes.
Who am I? Why am I here? What's the meaning and purpose of all this? And you said it earlier, like, what is real? What is reality? This is all things that are, resonant with this shifting into higher awareness, these psychic phenomenon.
I knew things I've never heard of before. And I would say and do and see things and draw stuff that I had never, symbols and whatever, I had never ever seen or heard of in my life.
So
I didn't even know how to spell.
Let's talk about that too. Another dark side of the shift is that when you do have experiences like this and you try to share them with people, they're not always welcomed with open arms, because essentially you are operating from another dimension of consciousness that not everyone on the planet has accessed yet. So if you try to share from that level and people haven't yet experienced that level, you can actually get rejected, and it can cause a lot of trauma. So a lot of people who have these walk-in experiences or psychic phenomenon or prophetic dreams, and they share them with people, it scares the shit out of people. It scares the shift out of people. and then they can reject it, and then you feel, and then it can, so shifting can also be traumatic. And so here's the flip side of that. If you have a like-minded community, if you find a retreat or a workshop or a meeting with people of like mind who are experiencing the shift as well, it can help accelerate and also create a sense of belonging and sort of a little bit more of a grounding to this experience. We're not having these experiences for no reason. You didn't have that near-death experience for no reason.
No.
It was part of your awakening, part of your catalyst, which then becomes part of your service, which is sometimes an answer to that question, who am I?
I wouldn't be here
doing the work that you do.
And possibly not here at all. Period.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, it's very intense. And there, this is bringing up something that you said, bringing up the three things that people want in their life to feel fulfilled. And safety and security is the first one. And the second one is to have belonging, to feel loved and respected. And then the third is to be empowered instead of control, right?
Absolutely.
When we don't feel empowered, we try to control things. And when we're in that space, you do want to have somebody or a group, a tribe to connect with, to be there and support and be able to work through your process, whatever that is and whatever it means for you. People go through things in different ways.
I think that's another reason why we wanted to start something like this too, was to create the conversation around like what is this? What is shifting into higher awareness? And also, how do we support the awakening that's happening? I see it almost every single day where people are coming into the store and they're like talking about these psychic phenomenons or these experiences, these synchronicities, or the deep and painful suffering that can lead to awakening. People are having this because once we really expand our awareness to understand we are all one consciousness, even though we experience ourselves as separate beings, we are all one consciousness. And as consciousness expands and awakens through the individual, it creates a momentum. And so we are seeing a widespread awakening of consciousness, and we need communities, we need networks to help this awakening happen. We are incredibly powerful beings. And so to that sense of empowerment, if you feel as though as an individual you are capable of creating change in the world, change that is beneficial, you will live your life differently. You will have a different level of responsibility for what it means to be human, and then you become this active participant in your creation and in the collective creation. We start to realize we are all creating this. If consciousness creates reality, and reality is sometimes very challenging and difficult, what can I do? How can I live to make it a little bit better? And for the one thing that changed my life that was such an aid in my own awakening was community, spiritual community. As soon as I found people of like mind, of like heart, and I was able to be with them regularly and consistently, my life changed for the better. So if we can do that for the people who are listening, that's one way that we can contribute to the shift. So I invite everybody who's watched the video or is watching the video, leave a comment, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube. Where are you at in your awakening process? What are some of the things that you're struggling with? What are some of the better aspects of it? Engage with us, because part of it is playful too. Shooting the shift is playful for us.
Yeah, we want to be able to give something to you guys as well. So if you engage with us, if you ask questions, we'll be able to answer those.
I'm really curious too about the Merkaba meditation. And it's so funny because I never knew that you had studied Drunvalo's stuff. And actually Drunvalo's stuff was a massive catalyst for my awakening. When I found his Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life books and I started doing the Merkaba meditation and all of those things, it was a rapid acceleration of my own consciousness. So maybe we could create a version of that meditation to share with our group. I think that could be very helpful, and maybe it's something that we'll do in the future.
Yeah, because there's definitely levels of that meditation.
Absolutely.
It's pretty powerful.
So just to kind of wrap up some of the stuff that we talked about today, awakening, it's not always glamorous. For a lot of people, suffering leads to awakening. I know clearly now we know that was Nicole's case. That was also my experience, but it doesn't have to be that way. And it's another reason why we want to have these conversations, because if we expand our consciousness willingly, just out of curiosity of starting to ask these questions early on. Who am I? Why am I here? We don't have to feel the pain and the suffering that often leads to those questions. We can just start asking them. And if you invite in that level of consciousness, it will start to, it's an engagement process. There is what I like to call supernatural aid that will come in and help those answers, help deliver the answers to those questions into your life. So I start to ask those questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What is consciousness? Why am I aware that I'm aware?
What are your values?
That's
a huge one.
Exactly. Yeah, like what do I value in life? Because what we value, we
Yeah.
create. So curiosity can also lead to awakening. It doesn't always have to be suffering. It can be curiosity.
Yeah.
And
There's so many things. So what is it that you want to hear from us? Because we can delve deeper into any topic at any time. So
yeah, what are the most
Thank you.
exciting parts of awakening? And what are the most challenging parts? And maybe we'll speak to that next time. And also, don't forget, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you will know every time Nicole and I are talking shift. And hopefully we'll see you next time.
See you next time.